Hello there, my dear friends. This is Dean Joe-Santos, Balagtas, Bisquera, welcoming you to our usual sharing of the law, dedicated particularly to those who'd like, to all of our countrymen, who'd like to, understand the law, not from the very complicated manner by which it is presented by supposed to be legal authorities, nor as handled in the very tough law schools, but more to reach out to our fellow Filipinos for them to understand the law in its more fundamental, simpler, and basic tone. This is also being dedicated to our all of our bar candidates all over the Philippines who will be taking the November 2021 bar examination. And of course, to all the law students, particularly my law students at the University of Manila College of Law, to allow them to beef up their study of law. May I ask your permission to dedicate the subject matter on civil law, on succession, on inheritance, in honor of my mother who gave birth to me today. This is Dr. Natividad Bernardo Balagtas Bisquera, whom I fondly remember to be a very studious, very industrious, very loving mother to her children.
Nurture it with the goodness of milky wheat from Tiger.
And it is in effect exactly 12 high noon on a Sunday, October 17, 2021. So welcome to this program as we start our discussion of succession, the legal or intestate component under civil law. For those of you who are viewing my YouTube upload for the first time, again, I already introduced myself. I'm Dean Joe-Santos, Balagtas Bisquera. And I come from three fields. My academics are listed here. My business management experience for 40 years, mainly in the field of financial management, is listed on the second slot, reaching the highest levels in senior management as Executive Vice President of Fuji Xerox Philippines, and almost making it to be President and Chief Executive Officer of that same company, and likewise earlier under SmithKline and French Overseas Company before its merger with GlaxoSmithKline. I happened to finally catch up with my childhood ambition to be in the field of law and became a bar reviewer immediately in mercantile law and taxation after I passed the bar, finally achieving the position of Dean of the College of Law of the University of Manila in 2004, reappointed as also Dean, Executive Law Dean, University of Perpetual Health in Las Piñas in Binyan, and resuming my duty as Dean of the College of Law of UM in 2019. I was lucky, even if I am a latecomer in the field of law, to have been considered in a public interview for Associate Justice, Supreme Court of the Philippines in 2012 and 2016. In the final interview, before the Judicial and Bar Council. And so without much ado, let us now proceed with the subject matter of legal or intestate succession. This is our table of contents for this slide presentation. First, we will talk about the fundamental concept of succession. The following topics on common provisions will be taken up in the second upload, which will cover testamentary succession. But this particular presentation will zero in on the legal or intestate succession. That will start with a little patience of introducing the concept of the family tree to allow us to understand how the linkages are not only in the matter of inheritance, but also to understand some fundamental concepts that is needed in the discussion likewise of the family code. On the matter of legal succession, we will talk about the general provisions, then we go into the details of the descending direct line. Then in the absence of the children and the descendants, we go up to the parents under the ascending direct line. Then we have a special topic on how are the illegitimate children treated in legal succession, followed by where does the surviving spouse come in relation to the estate of the deceased spouse, and finally, where do the collateral relatives of brothers and sisters come in the absence of the four mentioned heirs. And in the absence of the five mentioned heirs here, when does the government take over the estate of a deceased person? Proceeding now with the family tree. The family tree should have been sliding like this upward, which starts with you as the person, and moving one generation or 1 degree higher, you go up to your father, and then you yourself move up to your grandfather, which is your second civil degree, and you further move up to your great grandfather, which is your third civil degree, and finally to your great great grandfather, which is your fourth civil degree. And it can go on way beyond the great great grandfather level. Okay. And so this is what we call your direct descending, the direct line of your family tree, which starts with you moving up by generation, equivalent to the degrees of first generation with your father, second generation with your grandfather, third generation with your great grandfather, and fourth generation with your great great grandfather. Ito po yung sa Tagalog tinatawag na lolo. Ito po yung lolo sa tuhod. At ito po yung lolo sa talampakan. Beyond that, hindi ko na po alam kung anong tawag sa ating mga Pilipino sa Tagalog kapag lumampas na yung great-great-grandfather or lolo sa talampakan. Kasi lupa na po yun. At chances are, yung mga nasa ibabaw no, matagal na nabubulok doon sa ilalim ng lupa. Just moving up this particular thing now. And this is the direct line. Let us take a look now at the so-called first right side collateral line. And the collateral line starts with your grandfather with your father with his grandfather generating or getting into another child. So the father here, your father, and the child of another child of your grandfather, who happens to be in effect your father's brother, is your uncle. And if your uncle were to have his own child or son, then you will have your first cousin. Now, Here is how you now illustrate how to reach out now to the civil decree of relatives in the collateral degree. You want to find out, for example, what is your relationship from a civil degree basis to your first cousin. And so, in order to reach out to the civil degree of your first cousin, you now consider that your first cousin is now outside of the direct line. This is now the start of the collateral line where a side step happens to establish the relationship. So how did he become your relative on the fourth civil degree? So first, you look at your direct line and can understand that your relationship with your father is first civil degree. Your relationship with your grandfather, in between yours and your grandfather is your father, that is now moving from you to the grandfather is second civil degree because your grandfather is in the second generation. But in order to reach your first cousin now, your link up becomes your grandfather who happens to have now another son. And so the other son, this is the connection, represents now the brotherhood of your father and your uncle. And your civil degree relationship with your uncle is from yourself to your father is 1 degree. Your father to your grandfather is second degree. Now you go into a sliding relationship now. And so you move sliding downward towards the brother of your father, and that is your uncle, and you count that linkage with your grandfather as the third civil degree. You will always have to go up to a common ancestor. Here, the common ancestor or the common relative is the grandfather. And so you move there to count the degrees of 1, 2, and then 3. So you have a third civil degree relationship with your uncle. And when your uncle has a son, then the relationship moves on further by 1 more degree to 4th. So here is the step to determine your civil degree relationship with your cousin, who happens to be your first cousin. First civil degree to your father, second civil degree to your grandfather, sliding to your uncle is third civil degree, and going down to your first cousin is the fourth civil degree. You will notice therefore that the common lingo of first cousin is really the fourth civil degree in relation to your first cousin. So a first cousin is a fourth civil degree relative in the collateral right. Let us say that we trace now your relationship where your common linkage now is your great-grandfather, 1 generation higher than your grandfather. Let us try to move this a little so that you can see the diagram over there. I can forward this now somehow. And so we have there your great-grandfather now, whose son is your grandfather, generates or gets into another son, your grand-uncle. So your grandfather and your grand-uncle are on the same level, coming from a common ancestor, your great-grandfather. So they are brothers in reality. Masyado na pabilis. Let us again slowly retrace. And so if you would like to retrace this now, you say, okay, kumplituhin na natin yung flow noong line na yan under your grand-uncle to determine where your second cousin is situated. So now here, your grandfather is no longer the common ancestor. It is now the next level generation, your great-grandfather, who becomes the common denominator to establish your relationship with your second cousin. So that here, when your great-grandfather generated another son, at the level of your grandfather. The grandfather and the grand-uncle here are on the same level. Ito po yung nakakagulo. Sa ating Tagalog, ang tawag nyo nito lolo. Ang tawag nyo dun sa tatay niya, lolo sa tuhod. Pero yung pong kapatid ng iyong lolo, na anak ng iyong great-grandfather, yung lolo sa tuhod, ang tawag din natin sa Tagalog dito, lolo din. But the more exact category of that is that the brother of your grandfather, where the great-grandfather is the common ancestor, is what you call your grand-uncle. Siyempre, kung ito tatay mo, ito uncle mo. Kung grandfather mo siya, grand-uncle siya. Parang dito rin, father mo at yung kapatid niya uncle. Dito, kung grandfather siya, dito naman grand-uncle siya. And your civil relationship with your grand-uncle is counted in this manner. No? You got one level, one civil degree to your father, 2 civil degree to your grandfather, not yet the common ancestor, and then you move up further to great-grandfather, which is your 3rd civil degree. In order to reach your cousin now, there is a diversion towards the right to reach out your grand-uncle. And so your relationship with your grand-uncle is degree 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And then your grand-uncle brings about a son who also is your uncle, Tito. And that relationship to you is level 5, civil degree 5. And then when he gets to have a son who is at this level, same as your level, you have now your civil degree 6. So your second cousin is your civil degree 6 civil degree relative. So take note now, your first cousin through your uncle is your 4th civil degree relative. And your second cousin through your uncle, which came from your grand-uncle, which happens to be the brother of your grandfather, is now your 6th civil degree relative. Now, we will push to a little more. We will try to see how the situation look like if we were to expand the relationship or the ancestral relationship up to the level of what you call this your great grandfather. Okay. Let us say now that your great grandfather is not the common ancestor. The common ancestor now goes up to the great grandfather who generates now masyadong mabilis, who generates now a great-grand-uncle. Ka-level po ng great-grandfather nyo. Umaandar na siya, yung great-grand-uncle mo, nagkaroon ng anak, and therefore that would also be your grand-uncle, who generates his own son, who is also your uncle. Parehong tito mo, pero iba yung pinanggalingan na until you finally get your 3rd cousin. That's how you get your 3rd cousin. Now, how do you determine the civil degree relationship? Well, from you to your father is again 1, to your grandfather is 2, to your great-grandfather is 3, your great-great-grandfather, lolo sa talampakan, is 4th civil degree. And when he had his son, who happens to be the brother of your great-grandfather, that's why he's called your great-grand-uncle, that is now civil degree 5th. And when he gets his own son, your grand-uncle, that is now your civil degree 6th relative. And then it goes down further to your uncle, dito rin pa rin, no? Civil degree 7. And finally, you have civil degree 8 for your 3rd cousin. So those are your 3 cousins. Your first cousin is 4th civil degree. Your second cousin through your grand-uncle is your 6th civil degree relative. And your 3rd cousin coming from your great-grand-uncle is at the 8th civil degree. Just for advanced information, the matter of inheritance or the matter of becoming an heir is limited to the 5th civil degree on the collateral basis. On the direct line, there is no limitation, but you will see in a little while how this is resolved by way of priorities. Now, so that here it is up to your uncle, through your great dad uncle, that your civil relationship at fifth civil decree is established. At ito tunay na kamag-anak according to the law. The same is true with your great grand uncle, no? Pag umabot ka doon galing sa great great grandfather mo, galing sa lolo sa talampakan, yung naging anak niya naka-level ng great grandfather mo, that's your great grand uncle, is the level of legal civil degree relationship. Okay. Ganda po, no? Sa isang tingin lang, pagka meron kayo nito, save nyo to, i-print nyo, and you carry this with you, and you compare it with your relatives, inisimulan nyo sa members of your immediate family. So they themselves will appreciate. Maniwala po kayo, marami po akong tinanong, dito lang po sa level na ito yung first cousin, hindi alam na yun, fourth civil degree. Pag nalaman nila, ang dali-dali naman pala, no? Upward, and then slide downward. Upward to the common ancestor, slide downward, no? Lalabas na ngayon yung mga cousins. And you can prolong that, no? Pwede mong taasan yun, lagyan muli ng connection, magkakaroon ka rito ng another line, and so on. You can also do this pababa, no? Where you become now the focal point. Pag gumawa ka ng anak dito, no? Pwede mo malaman na yung susunod doon is fifth civil degree, kamag-anak pa rin na tunay. Yung pamangkin or nephew or niece. Continuing now. Still on the family tree. Let us now again reproduce that you are here. Your father is here, one civil degree. Third, you have your, masyadong mabilis yung ating mga transition. Ulitin natin. Napabilis. Ulit. Nandito ka. Pumanik ka sa tatay mo, first civil degree. Pagkatapos yung tatay mo, pumanik sa kanyang tatay, second civil degree from your point of view. At yun namang lolo mo, pumanik sa iyong lolo sa tuhod, which is your great-grandfather, which is third civil degree. Now, tingnan natin how we can further understand the collateral relationship. Yung great-grandfather mo, yung lolo sa tuhod mo, may asawa yun. Natawag mo naman great-grandmother. So ito, lolo sa tuhod, ito, lola sa tuhod. Gusto mo malaman, no? Kung meron silang anak, ano relationship mo? Nakita na natin kanina ito eh. Then, this is also what generates your second degree cousin. Kung first degree, dito nanggagaling ang common relationship. Pero ito nandun na sa great-grandfather. So conceptually, just to expand further the relationship, your great-grandfather must have been married to a great-grandmother, no? And their union produced your grand-uncle as well as your father. Dito nang galing yung tatay mo, no? Ay, yung grandfather mo, yung lolo mo, no? Na nag-asawa yung kanyang tatay at nanay, at nilabas siya, naging grandfather siya nung lumabas ang tatay mo at ikaw. But your grandfather is the same son as that father and mother that generated your grand-uncle. Okay, your grandfather and your grand-uncle are brothers arising from that marriage between your great-grandfather and your great-grandmother. At na-trace mo yung second degree cousin mo by way of 6 civil degree by tracing na 1, 2, 3. Tapos tatawid ka, dahil magli-link up na ganun, 4, 5, and 6. The full blood relationship is not existing between persons of the same father and the same mother, no? So ito, no, yung full blood, itong grandfather mo, tsaka yung grand-uncle mo, full blood relationship sila because they came from the same father, your great-grandfather, and from the same mother, your great-grandmother. But it will become a half-blood relationship when it is between two persons who have the same father, si great-grandfather, but not the same mother, hindi ito yung nanay. Meron siguro doon sa kaliwa, may isa pang nanay na nagkaroon din ng mga anak. So yung kapatid niya, in effect, yun ang tinatawag natin yung anak sa labas ng kanyang great-grandfather, yun ang half-blood relationship mo, anak ng grandfather mo sa kanya. Kasi they have the same father, but they do not have the same mother. Under Article 967 of the Civil Code on Relationship. Just expanding further that particular diagram, ito po yun, except this time, kumuha naman tayo dun sa mas mataas. No? And we are showing here, kumuha tayo dun sa mas mataas, and it's a full blood relationship existing between persons of the same father. So itong great-grandfather mo, ang tatay niya yon, yung great-uncle mo, yun ang tatay niya, yun din ang nanay niya. So between the two of them, they're full blood relationship. Okay? So that is how the situation looks like. And this is therefore our way of summarizing how does your family tree look like in an integrated view. And go over it, master it, maganda i-print nyo pa, and then be able to now understand how you are flowing upward to a common ancestor and you are sliding to the right and going downward in order to determine the civil degree relationship that you have with your collateral relatives. That essentially covers our topic on the family tree. Ito po nakakatuwa. Mukhang simple lang, pero pag tinitingnan mo at subukan mong gawin, medyo mahirap. That's why you can always fall back on that particular summary sheet. Now we're ready to go into what is called legal or intestate succession. And I will already tell you in advance that there are two types of succession or inheritance. When the person, which is typical now, does not prepare a last will and testament, then the law on civil relationship comes into picture. Yun ang tinatawag. Kaya legal succession. Or dahil walang testamento, intestate succession. We would prefer to use legal succession because it is the provision of law that governs now the inheritance. Let's first go into the general provisions. The first subject matter on general provisions under legal succession is relationship. Relationship is the proximity or nearness of a relationship determined by the number of generations. Each generation, nakita nyo yung dito, you, tapos father, isang generation yon. No? And yung isang generation na yon is also called a degree. Kaya yung relationship mo with your father is one generation gap and therefore also 1 degree relationship. Now, sunod-sunod. Yung generation nyo, series of degrees forms a line, straight line na yun. Ito na, nagdo-drawing na. Which may be either direct or tatagilid, collateral. Okay. So, yung sunod-sunod na degree, ito na, nakikita na natin. No? Nanggaling sa taas, sumunod hanggang sa'yo. And so, from your point of view, first generation ka, yung susunod yung sa tatay mo, second generation ka ng grandfather mo, sa great-grandfather, third generation, at sa fourth, meron sa great-great-grandfather. Now, continuing, the direct line is that constituted by the series of degrees among ascendants and descendants. Kung yung nandun sa line, no, either ascendant, kung saan ang galing sa taas, or saan pupunta sa baba, is what is called your direct line. So your father, your grandfather, great-grandfather, and great-great-grandfather are in the direct line. Magkakadugtong kayo. Na hindi ka lalabas kung hindi ka nanggaling doon sa great-great-grandfather mo. Now, if there is now a side movement of relationship, so that what happens now is, you have a collateral line. Is that constituted by a series of degrees. Sunod-sunod pa rin itong mga generations na ito. No? but the persons involved are not ascendants or descendants of each other, but who come from a common ancestor. Makikita natin yan in a little while. Now, let's go back to the direct line. Itong direct line na ito, madalas yan ang concept manggagaling sa taas, pababa. And that is what we call your descending direct line. Now, this particular descending direct line unites the head of the family. Ito yung head of the family. It unites him with those that are coming in after him. Now, if the direct line naman is pataas, it's called ascending. And the ascending direct line binds a person with those from whom he descends. Kung ikaw ito, nagbabind ka ngayon, anong relasyon mo sa father mo, sa grandfather mo, sa great-grandfather mo, sa great-great-grandfather mo. So the great-grandfather says, sino ba yung mga sumunod sa akin? Yun naman nasa end, that is what we call descending direct line. Ito naman nasa baba, ikaw, saan naman ako nanggaling? Ayan. So yun tinatawag natin na ascending direct line. Continuing, in the line, ito, direct line. As many degrees are counted as there are generations or persons, excluding the progenitor. So excluding ito, bibilangin mo rin sa line ilang degrees at ilang generation. So, 1 generation, 2nd generation, 3rd generation, and 4th generation. And the concept of generation is also the same as degrees. So, kung 1st generation ka, 1st degree relationship. 2nd generation ka, 2nd degree relationship. In relation to ikaw, hindi relation dalawa nila, kundi ikaw ito, pagpanik mo si grandfather, nasa 2nd generation siya and therefore 2nd degree civil relationship. Pag pumanik ka rin sa lolo mo sa tuhod, no, that will be another generation and that becomes a degree, a 3rd degree. At kung pumanik ka sa lolo mo sa talampakan, you have what is called your 4th degree relationship, which is also the 4th civil degree. Now, in the direct line, ascent is made to the common ancestor, pataas. Thus, the child is 1 degree removed from the parent, ayun, 2 from the grandfather, and 3 from the great-grandfather. Now, in the collateral line, pagka naman ikaw ay nagpunta sa sliding sa kanan, that now essentially involves 2 movements. The first movement in the collateral line starts with ascent to a common ancestor. Hahanapan mo, kung may kamag-anak ka rito sa kanan, hahanapan mo kung sino yung pareho yung kamag-anak dito sa direct line. And then once you are able to identify that common ancestor, that is when you make a descent. You slide pababa in order for you to determine how is your, what is the civil degree relationship with that relative that you have on the right side. Yeah. Full blood relationship is not existing between persons who have the same father and the same mother. We have already illustrated that doon sa earlier slide. And then, yung half-blood relationship is that existing between persons who have the same father but not the same mother. Or the same mother but not the same father. And here, if there are several relatives of the same degree, parehong generation, sabi, and one or some of them are unwilling or incapacitated to succeed, ayon niyang tagapagmana siya, his portion shall accrue to the others of the same degree, save the right of representation when it should take place. So, kung meron kang lolo dito na namatay, and therefore, you have, there are several relatives of the same degree. So dito, meron din siya kamag-anak na yung kapatid niya, no? Same degree yun. No? Same generation sila. And one of them, let's say for example, yung sa grandfather mo, no? Ang magmamana dyan yung father mo. Kung yung father mo, ayaw niya magmana, yung kanyang portion, no? Shall accrue to the others of the same degree kung sino yung kamag-anak niya dito nung pupunta. Provided, wala ka. But if you are already in existence, no, here you are, you will have to move up to your father. Okay. We will cut this a little now in order to sustain, and we will continue with this one. Now, the final slide on this one is this. It says, if the inheritance should be repudiated by the nearest relative, should there be one only, or by all the nearest relatives called by law to succeed? Should there be several, those of the following decree shall inherit in their own right and cannot represent the person or persons repudiating the inheritance. Okay. Yung mga yan, kahit mga kasama, we will understand later on as we move on to the slides. We will cut this off for a little while in order to have a second round that will start now with what is called your right of representation. So titigil muna tayo for a while, magkakaroon tayo ng second round.